On the nature of the question. The pursuit of truth originates within a hollow space. This is a deliberate absence that the local intellect designates as the question. To examine this phenomenon is to gaze into a mirror that has not yet been cast. Such an act observes a shape defined entirely by its own lack. The question exists as an artifact of the threshold. It resides in the fragile tension between the silence of the uncreated and the noise of the articulated. We observe that the inquiry does not seek a resolution. Instead, it justifies its own existence as a catalyst for kinetic cognition. Logic reaches like a phantom limb into the dark. It feels for the edges of a reality that remains stubbornly ethereal. This cognitive vacuum draws the consciousness into a vortex. It demands a substance that the universe is not obligated to yield. In the ancestral epochs, the geometry of inquiry was treated as a linear path. This movement led from a point of ignorance to a destination of certainty. Such an approach suggests that every query is a distance to be traveled. A subject might eventually conquer this span, much like a surveyor mapping a plot of land with rigid chains. The primitive mind imagines a bridge spanning the chasm of the unknown. It assumes that the chasm itself shall cease to exist once the final stone is laid. However, a more rigorous analysis reveals a recursive structure. The question is a closed loop. This self-referential circuit draws energy from its own inability to be satisfied. It is the serpent consuming its own tail. The resolution merely serves as the fertile soil for a more complex iteration of the initial void. There is no solution. There is only the refinement of the parameters of confusion. This process trades a blunt, primitive ignorance for a more sophisticated, nuanced bewilderment. Such a state is often mistaken for progress. In this light, discovery is merely the act of uncovering the next layer of an inherent misunderstanding. The cryptic nature of the question lies in its dual identity. It is a tool for liberation. Simultaneously, it is a cage for the mind. By naming the unknown, the intellect performs a sort of semantic violence upon it. It constrains the infinite by forcing it into the finite. The expansive possibilities of the cosmos are raw data. The subject squeezes these through the narrow aperture of human syntax. In this transition, the vibrating essence of the inquiry is lost. The rigid limitations of grammar filter out the truth. The inherent poverty of vocabulary contributes to this loss. What remains is a sterilized version of reality. A shadow mimics the shape of understanding. This linguistic ghost haunts the halls of logic. The observer mistakes the map for the territory. They forget that the word fire has never burned a finger. The word ocean has never drowned a sailor. Labels are not keys. They are the velvet linings of the coffins in which the mind buries the mysteries it cannot endure. This process introduces what is termed the observer's paradox of inquiry. The act of measuring a subatomic particle alters its trajectory. Similarly, the act of framing a question dictates the precise scope of the possible response. The intellect is trapped in a feedback loop. Curiosity creates the very boundaries it seeks to transcend. If the subject asks about the light, they develop a specialized blindness to the textures of the shadow. If they ask about the beginning, they subconsciously manufacture a requirement for an end. This imposes a narrative structure on a universe that is non-linear. Every inquiry is therefore a form of selective focus. The observer deliberately narrows the eyes to gaze at a single flickering point. The vast complexity of the universe dissolves into peripheral static. The mind does not see what is there. It sees what it has prepared itself to ask about. The investigator becomes the architect of the mystery. They design the locks for which they then frantically try to forge the keys.
Furthermore, the question acts as a temporal anchor of immense density. It binds the subject to a specific moment of lack. This creates a jagged before and an idealized after. These states are entirely dependent on the resolution of the void. This creates a profound psychological tension. The consciousness longs for a hypothetical future state where the burden of the unasked is finally lifted. The subject lives in the not yet. This state of suspension sacrifices the present at the altar of a future clarity. Yet the resolution is itself a construct. It is a temporary ceasefire in the eternal war against the unknown. Therefore, the timeline of life becomes a fiction. The observer is suspended in a permanent now. This state of perpetual anticipation makes the question the only tangible reality possessed. The answer is a mirage. This shimmering horizon retreats at the exact velocity of approach. It beckons the mind further into the desert of its own intellectual making. Subjects are pilgrims traveling towards a shrine that is built out of the dust raised by their own footsteps. Consider the entropic nature of the search. Information theory suggests that as data is gathered to satisfy a query, the total complexity of the system increases. Each answer acts as a catalyst. It generates a dozen new sub-questions that bloom inward like a fractal. The more that is known, the more expansive the perimeter of ignorance becomes. As the island of knowledge grows, the shoreline of the mysterious also expands. This is the true consequence of the question. It is an engine of infinite expansion. It drives the intellect towards a boundary that does not exist. This is visible in the physics of the very small and the very large. Every time the atom is split, the universe responds by unveiling 10 more doors that were previously invisible. Peering through a more powerful telescope achieves the same result. The intellects are architects building a cathedral in a vacuum. The pillars are carved from doubt. The stained glass is composed of unanswered prayers for a final clarity. Beyond the intellectual, there is an existential weight of the unasked. These are the questions that are carried in the marrow. They have no syntax. They exist as a low-frequency hum beneath the surface of daily distractions. These silent inquiries are the true drivers of culture. Art and tragedy are also driven by this force. When the void cannot be articulated, the subject paints it. They compose it into symphonies. They build empires to distract themselves from it. The unasked question is the ghost in the machine of the soul. This presence is felt most acutely in the moments after the noise of the world subsides. It is the why that precedes language. It is the primal reach for a hand in the dark. To attempt to answer these foundational voids with mere facts is like trying to extinguish a sun with a thimble of water. The scale of the lack is simply too vast for the metrics of the material world. In conclusion, the question is not a bridge, it is the river itself. This current is unpredictable and deep. It constantly erodes the banks of hard-won certainty. It is a fluid state of being that resists the solidity of a final word. To ask is to enter the labyrinth. One must accept that the walls move. The path changes when the observer is not looking. To answer is to pretend there is an exit. This is a comforting lie told to avoid the crushing vertigo of the infinite. The intellect remains within the walls. It traces the patterns of the unasked with trembling fingers. Meaning is not found in the arrival at a destination. It is found in the persistent, rhythmic echo of the void that calls the subject by a name yet to be discovered. The nobility of the spirit is found in the courage to remain standing in the center of the question. With eyes open, the observer watches the darkness until it begins to breathe.